Welcome back, Moto community, and just all around good people, whether you ride bikes or just enjoy watching. I have Coach Rob Beams with me, and he's going to talk about injury prevention and then how to recover from injuries as well. And granted, yes, my injury is a grade 2 essentially sprain because I just tore some ligaments. I got lucky that I didn't break my ankle. When the little injury happened, I was freaking out that I was going to hear a pop in my knee or something because I've done that multiple times. And we all know that Coach has been helping me out with trying to train for a triathlon. So what was going through my head was like, dang it, Jim. I am screwed now because I am not at the level of fitness that I need to be to finish with my goals. And the only way to get there is more time. But now I have to sit back and heal before I can go. And I'm having a hard time with it, as we all do. So how you doing, Coach?
Hey, good morning, man. Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry you got injured. I do appreciate your idea of wanting to put this together so that, unfortunately, as we always say, there's two types of athletes, the one that has been hurt and one that will get hurt. And
I haven't heard that before, but that makes perfect sense.
Well, especially like in our triathlon world, well, in all sports, but like in the triathlon world where you're dialing in swimming, biking, running, strength training, and you're always trying to push that boundary to get a little bit fitter and a little bit faster. And there's a saying that we say in the endurance world, there's a fine line between being fit and fucked. And unfortunately, we're always searching for that finite line without trying to cross over it. And you mentioned something at the beginning of this show. I honestly wish you'd broken your ankle than tear the ligaments. And I know that may sound crazy to some of our listeners, but what people don't realize is ligaments do not have a lot of blood flow through them, where bone is actually in the blood community. So a bone will heal much quicker because of the excessive amount of blood flow that is available to it, where tendons and ligaments, they don't have a lot of blood flow. So I want the listeners to understand, if you've ever strained a ligament, I love how you just, casually said it's a grade 2 tear of the ligament. That's significant, not in the regards that it's going to take an eternity to recover, but it's frustrating for an athlete because a bone, and you've had broken bones, Johnny, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners have as well. The bones do heal quickly. It's astounding how quickly, and this is kind of barbaric, but when a bone heals and comes back, it's actually stronger than it was before it broke. So where you see the calcification and it comes back together, that's actually stronger than the rest of the bone around it. So the tendons and ligaments take a longer time to heal for that reason. I want to make sure people understand that.
I know every time I've torn any sort of ligaments, whether it's my MCL, PCL, dude, there's so much PT that goes involved with trying to get them to tighten back up so it doesn't feel as loose, and I'm able to kind of get back to the level that I once was. And
you brought up physical therapists, and I don't apologize for interrupting you, but I get it. We're all very, very tight on time, and adding something else to the to-do list is going to the physical therapist. Please go to the physical therapist, and here's why. That physical therapist, with the exception of your partner, is going to know your body as well as your partner will. And it's very, very, it's a significant importance for a couple of reasons, Johnny. Number one, they have a benchmark. When you present yourself, they go, "Oh, wow, Johnny, you got some pretty significant inflammation, swelling, tearing." You come in, they give you some modalities, do contrast therapy. Maybe they want to have you do some movement, maybe do some scraping. We'll talk about all these different things. But then when you go back and you see that physical therapist maybe once a week, and you do that for a month, they're able to measure your progress. What does that do for your brain, Johnny? We think that every day that goes by, we're just losing fitness. We're losing fitness. And actually, you're not. You just have a temporary setback. Your ankle is jacked up, but you have your other leg, you have your core, you have your shoulders, your back, your mental headspace, your nutrition, diaphragmatic breathing, hydration. There's plenty of things that you can work on. Is it annoying? Hell yeah. You really enjoy sweating, as you say in your other videos. It is your new outlet in a positive way. But that physical therapist is going to be your best friend, and no disrespect to physicians. They're pushing you in and getting you out pretty quick. That physical therapist is going to give you that dedicated 30, 60, 90 minutes. It's absolutely priceless. Don't cut physical therapy short. It's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, Two things, like when I was leaving the doctor after my little MRI, they were all like, hey, okay, here's a prescription. Do you want 800 milligrams of ibuprofen or do you want some Vicodin? And I was like, I don't want either of it. Just keep. They're like, well, we have to give you something. And so I never went by the pharmacist to pick it up just because I know what those, they're depressants. They're depressants. And just like what you were saying, I'm hard enough on myself, and it's the old racer in me that makes it to where, like, yeah, I do feel like I'm losing fitness. And I've thought about, like, maybe I could still just do some pull-ups, and maybe I'll do some bench and, some stuff for my arms, since I can't put a whole lot of weight on my ankle right now. Again, it's a very minor injury, and I got lucky.
It's not. No, it's not minor at all, buddy. And again, I love you to death, but because you've had such incredibly bad injuries, you're comparing a strained ligament to you smashing the shit out of yourself and almost dying in the hospital. Don't mean to rip a scab off, but that's your basis of comparison. I mean, a tendon tear, I mean, that's a significant injury. And not, again, I don't want to say, pull the red parachute, but you're having a tendency to undermine it. And that just shows you how tough motocross and supercross and off-road riders really are, because for the average Joe, they'd be like, oh man, I'm on crutches and now I'm on this little wheelie thing with my knee and it's no big deal. And then the average person is like, oh my gosh, I've got torn ligaments. I'm off my feet for 6 weeks. It's a big deal. It's a significant deal. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's bigger than you're giving it credit to. But that just shows you how tough.
I guess you have you're totally right. You're totally right. It's just, it was a bummer because when I found out that, like, I didn't break anything, and then they wanted to do some more tests and found out what was actually going on, I was like, A, this is going to be more money, and then 2, I'm going, well, I don't really want to tell anybody because it's not that bad. It's not a break. It's not a physical break. And so it honestly, it took a lot for me just to, if I'm being candid, to decide, hey, I'm actually going to show people what happened and kind of start this whole process. Because you are correct, Coach. You are correct that's the problem with this sport, is we have this ideology of the McAdoos to make sure that, hey, if it's not 4 times as big, and if you're not like Reyes, when he almost died, he was riding with a broken ankle before he popped his lungs and had a internal bleeding in his spleen and all sorts of bad shit going on. So we just have this bad point of view that if it's not a catastrophic injury, then you might as well just suck it up and keep riding or training.
Well, and I don't mean to keep using the F word, but you think about it in the triathlon world, when we say there's a fine line between being fit and fucked, there's somebody riding with a broken ankle. That's pretty messed up. But we can go down the whole reasons why he's having to, he's trying to make a living at it. And unfortunately, we say in the physiology world that the second injury is usually worse than the first, and it's a byproduct of the first. I know that sounds a little rhetorical, but it's just true. You see Crashadoo, second injury, ends up putting Chris Bloss in a helicopter ride. Even though it wasn't McAdoo that got injured as bad as Chris, Bloss's should have never happened because McAdoo shouldn't have been on the track. And you and Chris have done great videos on that. That's not what I'm here to talk about. But for somebody like yourself, if you go out and you try to do more on the ankle, it's only going to make another injury happen, and it tends to be worse. I do want to have you go back to one thing for the sake of the listeners. Please don't be trepidatious to take ibuprofen before going to bed. And here's why. When you go to bed, you want that sleep quality to be as good as you can possibly make it, because that's where your body's going to really recover and heal. So if you keep getting woken up to every time you roll over and your foot gets tweaked by the sheets and it wakes you up, now an injury that we might be able to get over in 4 weeks. If you don't sleep well for those 3 or 4 weeks, that might take 8 or even 10 weeks before you heal. Now, I get it. I don't take pain medicine or anything else. But Johnny, as you and I have teased off the record, because you don't take ibuprofen on a regular basis, the old joke, you're not a cheap date, you're just an inexpensive date. That's the same thing, right? You don't have ibuprofen.
You're funny because I had this conversation with my wife because she was the one that told me to freaking go to, because I didn't go to the ER until gosh, 30, almost 48 hours after it happened, because she's like, you just need to figure, it'll be good for your mental space if you just know what the hell is going on.
Exactly.
I'm like, babe, I don't think it's really that bad. She's like, well, it's black and blue and it's big. You should go. We've got a baby you're watching, and you're sitting here hobbling around on crutches. Like, what the F are you doing? Yeah. And then once I got out, I told her what was going on, and she's like, all right, go by the pharmacy, pick that stuff up. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to pick that stuff up. And she was, if you've seen the videos, my wife is very straightforward, which I love about her. And sometimes it makes me just feel like super, like, oh gosh. But my point is she said that same thing. And she said that, Johnny, in order for you to heal, not having a little bit of pain management will help you heal. And part of me that wants nothing to do with pain management is because some of my prior deals, I was addicted to morphine, and it was bad. I never want to experience that stuff again. So I'm just like, I want to stay the F away from any of that stuff, even though people say, like, as simple as ibuprofen, you can't get addicted to it. But I'm better off just not even being part of that. But that's just my own experiences.
But that's completely justified. If I can not decide with Paige, but just to kind of bring another perspective, the fact that the ibuprofen is non-addictive, which is a good thing, and because you don't put anything in your system on a regular basis, the efficacy of that product, the effectiveness of that product is going to actually go up because you normally have nothing in your system. So it's going to be more powerful. And here's what's an additional benefit for you and the listeners. When you put the ibuprofen, the acetaminophen in specifically, it has an anti-inflammatory characteristic to it. So you're getting two benefits.
Yeah, she talked about that too.
And the anti-inflammatory. So now we've shortened the life of that injury, which is what we all want. And that's the hard part. You've only got one tank of energy. And, I contradict myself a little bit because I want you to go and work your shoulders and your back. One of the things I was going to recommend is either buy a set of roller skates and put your foot in that roller skate, or just simply put your foot on a skateboard and do the Concept 2 rower where the skateboard just goes back and forth. You can do upper body, and the other leg still gets the load. You get your heart rate up. You're not going to put any load on that injured, but you're still working out. You and I have talked about it. I would take a swim buoy and I'd put it in between your thighs. Go swim, so that way you don't let your foot go up and down and jeopardize that tendon and ligament. But now you're swimming against the density of the water. It takes 8 times the amount of energy to move from point A to point B in the water than it does in the air because of the density of the water. You're going to have a low heart rate because the hydrostatic pressure is pushing on the body, so the heart rate stays low. So you get more fat burn, you get a cardiovascular workout, and you build the strength. And you're, with your ankle behind you, it doesn't, because you're not kicking hard, you don't run the risk of jeopardizing it. Even if you want, you remember you and I talked about those stretch cords, just wrap those around your ankle, put the pull buoy in between your thighs so you're horizontal in the water. And there's no way that your foot will want, because like you were saying, a lot of times even with the pull buoy, your foot from the knee down wants to kick. We don't want to put any load on that foot, but there's a multitude of ways that you can still do exercise, cardio, strength, flexibility, then the non-sweating components, nutrition, sleep, hydration, and diaphragmatic breathing.
Yeah, Coach, if I'm being honest, so David Goggins, he's got a book that says You Can't Hurt Me, and one of the things that I really enjoyed from that book was movement is not optional, it's essential. And it's basically, in order to be happy, is we were designed to move. Hunters and gatherers, we weren't designed to sit at a desk and watch TV, and that's how we were supposed to go about. Like, we release good endorphins from sweating. And you're absolutely right, because if I'm being honest, last night I was just being in a bad mood, and my wife was like, what the heck is going on? And I couldn't pinpoint why. I was just in a bad mood. I'm going, babe, it's just a bummer. But the truth of the matter is at this point, I'd be close to 30 miles running, because I've been averaging right around like 5 miles a day, Granted, some days I'll go longer, but and then I'd be in the gym a couple times because I've got a goal for something, and since that was kind of sort of taken from me because I have to wait a few weeks, I guess subconsciously I've kind of thrown in the towel, just be like, screw this. And I've noticed I've eaten some more cookies, I've had some soda. I'm just kind of got this attitude of whatever, I'll get back into it when I can. And I'm a big believer in, gosh, sometimes, your hormones kind of dictate our reaction to stuff. And I guess if I've got more sugar in my body and I'm not working out and stuff, like, no wonder I'm in a bad mood, right? There's not something that I can lay out on with like my Garmin watch that literally says, hey, Johnny, you're in a bad mood because of these certain levels, which would be easier if you could, I guess. Gosh.
I hope the listeners realize that this is not a scripted conversation. You and I are just talking.
Oh, they definitely know, because I'm rambling on trying to get my thoughts in here, and it's
no, and I'm glad you are, because you are representing anybody who's been injured at any level in the frustrations that come with it. We get into our own little parent-teacher conference. Oh, you're a pansy, toughen up. We get into this little negative chatter. You just brought up three things that are very, 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 very important, and I hope the listeners are sticking with us on this. Number one, when you exercise, that releases dopamine. That's a feel-good hormone. People understand that for the most part. You take someone like yourself where you've got that release consistently 5-6 days a week. All of a sudden that goes from being released to not being released. That's like somebody, slamming the front wheel down. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I mean, so you've got that, I'm going to use the word loosely, withdrawal. You're used to getting that every day. All of a sudden it goes away. So this psychosomatic situation you're in is not just a figment of your imagination. It's legit. But you said something that's really important, and I hope the listeners will catch on to it. You notice how you mentioned that you're craving simple sugars? People, and you and I have talked about this off the record. I've done videos on this. I am not making excuses for people. I'm not. When you just mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that the role of hormones in the human body is to do nothing more than to communicate. That's their sole purpose in the body. When you get under stress, in this case, stress is coming from an injury. When you're under stress that you got served papers and you're going to get a divorce, when you got served papers that you realize that you now have to file for bankruptcy because you've got a medical bill that's just you can't get out from underneath, the amount of stress that the body goes through is no different than most people think of stress as I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to run super hard or lift really hard or I'm going to do a HIIT workout, right? That's the stress that we associate it with. When you expose your body to stress mentally and or physically, your pancreas releases a huge shot of insulin. And when you remember how we've talked about this, one of the goals with eating healthy with fruits and vegetables and lean protein is to stabilize blood sugar levels. It sounds real big and sophisticated. Think back to when we were in elementary school, middle school, high school. We're in school for 8-9 hours. What is the first thing that we attacked when we came home? We went straight to the pantry, which is a box, a bag, a can of something that's processed carbohydrates. That is low blood sugar. You go, Rob, what the hell are you talking about? Johnny is injured and is craving simple sugars. Yes. When the body is under stress, which Johnny is because of the injury, it causes the pancreas to start shooting insulin. So it's as if you just ate junk food, and the craving for simple sugars is a byproduct of the stress coming from an injury. That is not you being weak. It is a hormonal adjustment that's going on in the body. I can't emphasize this enough.
Hearing you say it makes sense because, Rob, it's interesting because I didn't have any of this direction when I was racing in my early 20s. I just hit my head against the wall and you just go harder every day, which was totally wrong. But I don't get a do-over. And then now that I'm older and I read a lot more and, I have you, I'm a numbers guy. There's freaking Bitcoin back there. But I really like the analytics about stuff. And I've done some blood tests before, and typically my just blood pressure is 110 over like 60. And when I went to the ER, I was like 137 over 121, which was like
There you
hypertension.
go.
And I told my
Yep.
wife, I was like, babe, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like, why is my blood pressure so high? And I should have just asked the doctor, but my wife is basically a doctor. And she was like, Johnny,
Exactly.
you just had an injury. Your body's trying to heal. You're stressed the fuck out. No wonder your blood
Yep.
pressure's high. And I
Yeah.
didn't even really compute the two. I was like, whatever, babe. Like, it's not that bad. I've been hurt way more. But it's just interesting how your body adjusts to things and you unconsciously don't even know it. And I know that like
Well,
I've
that's
been
why.
I've been sleeping a
Mhm.
lot more, and I'm not saying I'm depressed, because I still feel happy, but I guess if I'm
Mhm.
adding all these little things together, is
Sure.
I don't really have that goal to wake up at 5 to go run before the kid wakes up. I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna sleep in an extra hour and a half or so.
Yeah. Well, you just said it yourself. You've already downplayed the magnitude of the injury. So because you've downplayed the magnitude of the injury, and then you're sleepy because your body's trying to recover from an injury, it's like throwing kerosene on a fire, because then your little negative canary on your shoulder is like, oh, see, you are lazy. See, you are being a pansy. You are. So that negative chatter starts to snowball until it starts to become a runaway train. And that's what makes this so difficult with an injury, because you're acclimated to the hormonal release of feel-good hormones, dopamine. You're like, hey, suck it up, buttercup, let's push through this. And then you're literally at a point where if you do any more work on that ankle, you're only going to make it worse. And that's where it becomes a vicious catch-22 for you. The other thing that people need to understand is when you hit the ground, and again, as racers, we minimize this so much. When you hit the ground, I don't care if it's just you hit your shoulder, Johnny, in your case, you got that ankle caught underneath there. But if you watch your YouTube video, you can see the front end tucks, your ankle does get caught and you go down, right? Well, when you go down, you intuitively put your knee out. Anybody who's ridden bicycles with clipless pedals, that first ride where you roll up to the intersection and you forgot you're clipped in and you can't clip out. When you fall down, what's the first thing you hit? Your knee, because you put your knee out. You go, Rob, what's the big deal about that? Every single part of your body that hits the ground now has some level of an impact injury. And when you hit the ground, you're always in a race against space and time. So Johnny, when that ankle blew up the way it did, it's a self-defense mechanism for the body that it says trauma. It engorges the area with blood flow to minimize the mobility of that ankle to keep you from doing more damage. The self-defense mechanism. But what we underestimate, and Johnny, you've probably seen this, again, I hate to rip a scab off, when you went through that significant injury, when you almost died, as those injuries started to go away, how many other injuries did they find that were a little bit lower on the pecking order that you weren't even aware of, because over here was so significantly painful? Then you start to realize, oh, I've got an MCL tear, I've got a meniscus tear. Well, all
Yeah,
the
and I
other
broke my
internals were
hand and all this
already,
stuff, but I had no idea
yeah,
what was going
no
on.
idea. And that's where we get into the pecking order of pain. And then when you recognize it, the reason why we say you're in a race against space and time is because the space of the impact area is going to get engorged with blood. That's to keep you from doing more damage. So then when you see somebody that goes and throws moist heat or a heating pad on an injury, is making it worse because you're causing more vasodilation, which is only going to engorge that area. That's why we say when you get initially hurt, it's considered an acute injury. Acute would be the first 72 hours. You never introduce heat. You only use cold to vasoconstrict to try to offset the inflammation process. So again, people have made mistakes by doing that. And I understand if you're at like something like a multi-day race and you get injured on day one, we spend a lot of time and money getting there. So we pop the ibuprofen, we wrap it up with duct tape. I've seen some pretty bizarre things that we're going racing because we spent all year trying to get to this race, and it's a 5-day race and we got to be there. I've had the privilege of working with a couple of riders that one guy just qualified for ISDE at the club level. And, if you've just spent a year training and qualifying for ISDE and then you get injured on day 2, are we going to always take the healthy route? No, you want to finish that race. Look at Daniel Sanders at Dakar that got that like a cactus piece got stuck in his arm. he was leading the first 3 to 4 days until it got infected, and his energy and his ability to sleep, he's running a fever, ended up costing him. I think he finished inside the top 10. But then if you watch that video where they went and pulled that out, it was just the tip of a thorn, but it got infected in the course of the race day. We do unhealthy things sometimes to get across the finish line, but when you understand that you're in a race against space and time, the use of hot and cold at the wrong time can actually exacerbate this whole situation.
Yeah, so
That's why
two
I'm glad
things
Paige taught you
there.
to go into the ER. Sorry.
As soon as that happened, I was like, I'm gonna get back on the bike and ride. Like, I don't think it's that bad, and that was just my old self going, where I was like, I'm gonna finish what I had planned. I was gonna make this silly YouTube video about sitting down and sticking my leg out. Like, I'll worry about it later. And then the 30-year-old in me was like, maybe we should go to the ER. So that's when I went back and had that conversation with my wife. And the next thing, Coach, was, so do you think part of the reason why I'm sleeping more is because my body's trying to heal itself? Like, that's why I feel more
100%.
tired?
100%. You've only got one tank of energy. And if you think about a pie chart, the injury just took over 20, 30% of your energy bank. So that's where, again, I sound like I'm contradicting myself. I still want you to go to the pool, but notice that we're using the word low intensity. It's very hard to get the heart rate elevated when you swim because of the hydrostatic pressure. It's non-load bearing, so it's going to be less stressful, but you still get the endorphin release, you still get the cardiovascular benefit, you still get the strength in your upper body, your core from rotating in the water. But yes, and it becomes a catch-22. You're not getting the endorphin release, so the sense of being depressed, if we may use that word respectfully, you're tired, which is not typically you because you're pretty much wide open from, literally, as you tease in your videos, WFO, from the moment you wake up until your baby wakes up, to when your baby goes to sleep, to when you and Paige say goodnight, and you're wide open everywhere in between. Now, all of a sudden, your body is tired because of the trauma with no dopamine release. That's a pretty lethal combination.
Yeah, no,
But the
because
key is respect the sleep. I know it's hard, especially with a little one, and you're playing Mr. Mom.
It's been weird because it's been a really long time since I've been injured, because I've been lucky. Usually I broke something every year, in my 20s, or multiple times, or I had one surgery every year. That's kind of how it went.
Yeah.
But I normally, when my baby goes to sleep, it's like 7:30, and I'm like, okay, now I always like reading a book for about an hour, and I have not wanted to do that this entire week. And I'm like, man, why am I just so freaking tired? I just want to go to bed. And I'm going, well, maybe I'm depressed because I'm not able to do anything. And then I start thinking, like, well, how am I going to start running 10, 12 miles a day on some of the longer days if I feel like I can't even read a book for an hour? Like, I'm going, this is not good. Have I lost this much fitness in the side of like 3-4 days? It's just that funny little cycle
Well, let it come back full circle. You've already minimized the magnitude of the injury. The fatigue and the demand on the body is telling you otherwise. And that's what makes all of our listeners so detrimental to themselves, is we have an abnormally high level of pain tolerance, whether it be through injuries or the discomfort of pushing and pulling a dirt bike around. It's hot, it's humid. We're not able to wick away sweat the way that the average person can. And you take it a step further, add a female motocrosser, like we work with Sophia Phelps and Sid Mason, and we have little Kenzie. You look at these females, not being rude or sexist at all, but they get them when they're old enough to hit maturity and they have a menstrual cycle. They go through that discomfort every 3.5, 4 weeks. They get pregnant. They're sick as a dog for 9 months. They go through a train wreck known as pregnancy. Then you put them on a dirt bike. It's like a joke for them. They're like, oh, sorry, you have a little boo-boo, right? I mean, women are really hard to work with. I had the privilege of working with Ashley Filick, and her pain tolerance is abnormal. I mean, just ridiculous, scary. And when you were talking about, I can't even read a book. How am I going to run 12 miles? You're comparing apples and zebras. The body is siphoning off energy because we have this mantra in the physiology world. If you don't give the body what it needs, it will take it. So think about health and wellness. If you don't make the time to be healthy, your illness is going to take the time from you eventually. Well, your injury is not purposeful, but unfortunately, if we don't respect it, it's going to start siphoning it off until we have no choice but to recognize it. And that's what you're experiencing. You being able to run 12 miles, that will come back within 2 to 3 months. That won't be a problem because we're going to start slowly. When you can get to where we can aqua jog or we can swim, we're going to have the water pushing against that. So you'll get the mobility of your ankle. You're going to work your cardiovascular. When we aqua jog in the water, the specificity of running, the hip flexor strength, hamstring, it'll all be there. And when you get back to the pavement or the off-road running, it won't be, you'll be at 75, 80%. You really will. And I'll prove that to you. Maybe we
I
can
know,
do a
but
video
in
to
3 months,
validate
that just sounds depressing right there, because
Yeah, but think about it's better than 3 years. It's better than 6 months. But if you can take what normally takes 4 months and we can reduce that to 3, you're like, hey, that's cool. Instead of 4, 3 sounds better. Goes back to what we said earlier. Control the controllables: food, sleep, flexibility, mental.
The
headspace.
doctors were telling me
And
that I'd probably feel comfortable enough in 4 weeks to start running and like 3 weeks to start cycling again. And I was wanting to push that to like next week or maybe the week after that, because they really told
listen
me
to what you're saying.
They said,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Coach. They told me that typically this grade 2 is 3 weeks at the earliest to kind of get back to normal stuff, and then 12 weeks to really be back to, if running hard again or something. And so I kind of looked at that like I'm cut that in half probably with how I'm feeling, or try to, because everyone wants to be the exception, not the rule, I guess is the point.
But that's the tiger in the belly that I love about competitive people, entrepreneurs, anybody who's willing to risk. And I know it sounds silly, but risk success. And you go, wait, you mean risk failure? No, risk success. More people are petrified of success because they feel if they're successful, there's pressure to keep being successful. No, a competitor, an entrepreneur, a leader, they recognize, they embrace that responsibility. There's no such thing, in my opinion, as pressure. Tomac isn't under pressure. He's worked hard for the privilege to be in that position. And that's where we get into the mental headspace of all of this. But you train to win. So when it comes to the race day, you just execute what you train. There's no room for pressure. It's just time to execute. But listen to what you just said, though, Johnny. If we were to look at the biomechanics of running, complete load bearing, going from load bearing, eccentric, concentric movements and all that go into it, when you can swim, you get ankle flexibility. That's stage 1. When you can cycle, that's where you're able to get that full circle. That's stage 2. You do that 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Like you were saying, let's cut that down in half. Great. Cut it in half with swimming and cycling. And then you'll be able to implement aqua jogging. Biomechanically, you're there working the same muscles against the density of the water. When your ankle can finally take full load, that's why I say you'll be at 75, 80%, because it's this last 20% is going to be up here. It's not physical, believe it or not. And here's the catch-20. This is the catch-22 for everyone, including yourself, Johnny. Unfortunately, when we get injured, our appetite gets suppressed. Appetite will be suppressed for a couple of reasons. High intensity always suppresses appetite. Notice, like after your Spartan race, you probably weren't real interested in eating a steak sandwich. Mm-mm. So appetite
I ended
gets
up having a
suppressed.
moldy PB&J because I didn't realize at 4 a.m. I was using old bread. And then when I got home that night, Paige was making some lunches for the next day because we were going to go hiking. And she was like, what the fuck? This is all moldy. She's like, Johnny, did you eat this stuff? And I'm like, yeah, I had 2 sandwiches for breakfast and lunch. And she's like, you didn't notice that it was green? I'm going, I was driving. I didn't notice that it was green.
Yep, little insulin in the morning before racing. Well, and this is where I want the listeners to recognize it's not a psychosomatic, when you bring the heart rate up, you suppress appetite. When you're in a hot, humid condition, you suppress appetite. And then the third variable, and relevant to what we're talking about here today, pain will suppress appetite. So I want you to think about the 10,000 foot view of why this
pain pills. Sorry to interrupt you. I know
no,
whenever
you're not
I
interrupting.
Pain pills, I never wanted to eat whatsoever, and I always lost a lot of weight. Well,
and this is where we're getting into a vicious snowball. Caffeine suppresses appetite. That's why if you look at a lot of the quote unquote weight loss products, they're just jacked up with caffeine because caffeine suppresses appetite and they say that's fat loss. No, you're just dehydrating yourself because you're not eating food, you're not retaining water. When you look at the idea that pain will suppress appetite, this is the worst possible scenario. Because when you eat food, and we're going to assume it's fruits, vegetables, and lean protein, you're eating healthy, not obsessive compulsive, you're just eating cleanly. Well, imagine, Johnny, if we put our hands together like this. This is your bloodstream, and this is the nutrients coming from the food. Well, if you're constantly providing good nutrients coming into the bloodstream, well, that's going to get into the bloodstream. You're in a mode of rest because you're keeping the load and the strain on the body minimal. It allows the effectiveness of those nutrients to do their job, and you're going to heal quicker. Well, shoot, I need the nutrients, but I have zero appetite because of the pain. Same thing when you get sick, right? The idea of eating is almost nauseating, but yet your body needs the nutrients to fight the virus that's in your system. It's the dichotomy of being a human being. When we need the nutrients, our body doesn't want it because pain suppresses appetite. And now we find ourselves in a vicious circle once again when the nutrients need to be permeating the blood flow to then facilitate recovery. This is where, and Johnny, you and I have talked about this off the record, I own a supplement company and I don't even want people taking supplements until we can validate that the need for supplementation is there. So when you get your blood work done and you're out of range of something, B6, B12, iron, zinc, whatever the it is, please adjust your food. Try to get your food intake up that's high in those nutrients that you've already proven are missing. Well, now you're injured. It puts double duty on all of the nutrients in the blood. So that's why we do, like we have bundles. We have a surgery bundle. We have an impact bundle. We have a concussion bundle. I'm not trying to peddle supplements. We've got to get into the system more of what it needs to shorten the life of in this case, the injury or a virus. Or if you go into surgery and you're under anesthesia, it's a different recovery than if you just break a bone, they reset it and they cast it. You've got to adjust your nutrition. And that's why you and I have been talking. Appetite's really not there. You mentioned it earlier. You're craving junk food. Well, that's because of the strain and the pain your body is on. Hey, your pancreas is in overdrive, dumping in insulin going, and now you're like a little cookie monster. You're looking for anything that's got a simple sugar in it. Yeah. It's not you being weak.
my daughter and I, we've been going to the pantry getting all the refined carbs because that's all she wants to eat. She doesn't like protein. She just wants to eat. Like the only natural thing that she really likes is cheese. So, but
okay.
Are those supplements available now on your website at all?
Yep. If you go over to the Coach Rob store, when you go down there, when you click on the product list, it actually has the bundles listed right there for you. And again, please understand, I'm not trying to peddle supplements, but I want people to understand if you want to shorten the virus or the injury, you've got to get the nutrients in. And the word supplementation is just that, supplement real food. We just want to give it more of what the body needs to heal. And that could be anything from, we want to get inflammation down. We want to get high quality fats in, high quality proteins in. And the other thing to keep in mind as well, when you're in a position of being injured, please don't overlook being hydrated. Johnny, this is why, like with your injury protocol, we have sent out Energy Fuel Light because it's the electrolytes that you're going to need. Your body's over revving. For those of us who remember when we had carburetors, right? The idle set a little too high. We need to bring that down just a little bit. Well, Johnny, imagine if this is your cell membrane. If the cell membrane is bigger, that means it's hydrated. It carries more oxygen. So remember how you were saying you're kind of feeling tired all the time? Well, if the cell membrane, if I'm carrying this much oxygen and I become dehydrated and I cut that down by 50%, my heart rate's going to be artificially elevated because the body still needs oxygen to heal and go through everyday, stress and things that we deal with. So when you're dehydrated, you're going to have an artificially elevated heart rate. And when you're injured, it's just a cascade of another, you just have more and more things working against you. That's why I appreciate when you asked about doing this show, what should I do? You want to stay hydrated. That hydration, the reason why we recommend the Energy Fuel Light is it has a little less calories in it, but it still has a big profile of electrolytes. Electrolytes are responsible for absorbing fluids and muscle contraction. So Johnny, if you do want to go to the pool and swim, you don't want to be in there making the swim is even more painful because you're dehydrated. You see the catch-22 in all this?
Yeah, yeah, no, I do. Sorry, I was trying to get on the screen looking at
Oh,
all your products here too with the concussion rehab bundle, and my all this stuff is.
now I've received some emails about our product. Again, I don't mind being blunt and transparent. You're going to find our supplements are not inexpensive, and that's because we don't have any fillers. We don't have any coloring agents. You have to have a practitioner's license to be able to have the supplements that we do. So I'm very, very proud of them, but please don't think they're going to be bargain price. If we say that there's COQ10 in it, it's 100% COQ10, and it's the highest quality that's available. So it's not cheap, but you are getting what you paid for. And again, it's not a sales pitch. I just get so annoyed with these supplement companies and these sports drink companies that have these so-called endorsers behind it. They're actually called investors. And they're out there touting product. And unfortunately, when you look at the ingredients, the ingredient quality, it's less than desirable. So not that, again, I sound a little bit arrogant when I say that. It's not about being arrogant. It's just about I'm proud that the reason why I created the supplement line and the reason why I created the sports drinks were because I couldn't find what I was looking for. I was looking for a sports drink that was based on the intensity and the duration that the athlete was working with. And I also wanted to make sure there was nothing artificial in it, because I've had athletes, when you go to the grocery store or you go to a convenience store and you grab what's called an RTD, a ready to drink. Well, when you pull that off the shelf and it's green and blue and all these exotic colors, you got to realize that your body is not designed to digest artificial colors. So I had an athlete who was actually at the racetrack. He had run out of our energy fuel, thought that he could run by a convenience store. And I don't mean to be rude, but his sphincter dilated because of the coloring agent that was in the sports drink that he bought off the shelf. And so he was literally pooping his pants as he was blitzing the whoops. I'm not trying to be rude, but I just don't want our athletes, when our listeners, when they're not feeling good to begin with, and then they're achy, they don't realize it's because they're dehydrated, and they're dehydrated because they have no appetite, and they have no appetite because of the pain level. It's a very vicious cycle, and it only delays how quickly you recover. That's why I was saying to you, Johnny, I want you to be able to cut what they said in half, but the only way we can do it is sleep and food. There's no other way we can get around it. It's frustrating.
No, it is. It is frustrating because I wish it was like a video game. You get to a level of fitness and you get to that level and you never de-level. But it seems
That's right.
all the work, it takes really long to get up there, and then it just can instantly just crash, which is a bummer.
But as you've built the habits of getting to where you're at, you can get there quicker. It's what we refer to as a familiarity principle. That's why my program is called the Blueprint of Success. If you see a house that you like and you buy the blueprints and you hand them off to a builder, he can build them. Well, I know what it takes to get you from where you're at to where you're going. Only thing I have to factor in is what are you doing professionally, educationally? There's those variables. That's called the everyday life. The blueprint of success is when you finally get to a certain level of accomplishment, if you know what you've done to get there, then we can keep building on it. If you don't know what you've done, I consider that an accidental success. And that's where you see guys that are not, and girls that are not able to repeat a championship because they didn't know what they did to do it the first time. And now they're wondering what they did the last time. And then we have a tendency to overtrain. And that's what I wanted to make sure that we got across with your injury is we don't want to be pushing that envelope, especially when you have such a high tolerance for pain. You literally become your own worst enemy. That's why I like you to go to a physical therapist that can help you get some boundaries. That's why I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation to share with the listeners. Please, you've got to have some legitimate checks and balances that are outside the scope of what's up here, because you are your own worst enemy. Or can be, I should say, without the right information.
This is all really good information, and this is the kind of stuff that I want to share with people. So thank you again, Coach, for coming on and making this. And I know we were planning on not talking for making it shorter, but there's so much information here. We had to keep going. I'm not somebody that like tries to coulda, woulda, shoulda type stuff, But I know at the Spartan race, it was super rocky there. And I remember twisting my ankle a couple times during it. And that was a week before this happened. Do you think it probably maybe loosened up those ligaments? So then when I did crash, it just was easier to actually tear them completely? Or do you feel like those things aren't correlated at all?
No, 100%. It's material is material. When you look at, not trying to insult anyone's, excuse me, anyone's intelligence, muscles attached to the bone through tendon, bones attached to each other through ligaments. When those ligaments get hyperextended like that, it's no different, Johnny, if you and I have a piece of aluminum and we bend it back and forth a few times, 2 or 3 bends, and it's already weaker.
Mm-hmm.
Again, coulda, woulda, shoulda. I do agree with you. After that Spartan race, had we known that you'd twisted that ankle so much, we should have done contrast therapy. We should have done scraping. We should have done some resistance training one of the biggest reasons why I have my athletes lift weights the week leading up to a race, it's not about building any strength. It's keeping the tendons and ligaments. It's what we call tensile strength. We want to keep that so it's super stable. We don't want to go in, and I could do an entire show with you about, if you think about, as you're sitting here listening to this webinar, this show together, your bone density, the thickness and the durability of your tendons and ligaments, and the quality of your muscles, right? So you have muscles, tendons, ligaments, and bones if you go from the top all the way to the center. The quality of the density of those items is a byproduct of your food habits, quality and quantity, and your sleep, quality and quantity. You want thick bones, you better eat clean, a lot of it, and you need to rest. You want thicker and more durable tendons and ligaments, eat better and rest. So now you go out and you run Spartan and you get a couple of those medial and lateral type of, you just weaken the ligaments, we can re-strengthen them. And if we had done that for 2 or 3 weeks and then you went out and rode, you would have definitely reduced
Yeah, it was literally
the chances
the next weekend.
It would have definitely helped. But coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I want to say thank you, because there might be 100 people that watch this show that they listen to that and they don't twist their ankles. And now you've done what your vision has always been, is to make the sport better. My dream with our company is I want to build more durable athletes so they can enjoy riding. Those that are hyper competitive, I want you to compete longer. And that's how I feel we can grow the sport, is by increasing the durability of our listeners. And that's a very big passion of mine. I love it. I'm still one of the biggest fans of the sport. I've been in it since 78, but I'm still one of the biggest fans. I'm still a kid on Saturday night. I look forward to watching the races. I live for it.
So before I let you go, Coach, what I should be doing is still being a little active, potentially get on the rower or get in the pool, so that I'm still releasing the dopamine, and maybe it's not as high intensity and it's not what my program's supposed to be, but just check that stuff at the door and continue just to kind of move, change my outlook from trying to get fitter to now I'm just recovering so I can kind of get back to baseline, and potentially just not put any more trauma on my simple injury. And I can't help but say it because it's crazy, because we could have had this conversation years ago when it just felt more impactful, because it was like, hey, look at all the pins I have and all this stuff, as opposed to this. But I think it's all relative. What do you suggest the next couple weeks look like with some sort of an acute injury?
Yeah, the number one thing I would do is adjust my daily schedule to make sure I'm getting at least 9 hours of sleep. And I know that's really hard for a lot of the listeners, but I mean, the only time your body recovers is when you sleep. I would make sure that you're grazing every couple hours to keep that blood sugar stabilized. If you're eating fruits and vegetables and lean protein, you're getting the micro and the macronutrients to heal. So it's a win-win. And then when you do exercise, low intensity keeps the stress down on the body, but you still get the movement. As you said, you get the hormone release. We get that movement, which increases muscle mass, bone density, tensile strength of tendons and ligaments. We get through this in about 4 to 6 weeks. You'll even forget that we had this conversation.
Perfect.
And then, of course, you can add certain things like soft tissue maintenance, like contrast therapy, massage therapy, scraping, and stuff like that. that's something that we'd want to trickle in if you have and when you
See,
have the time.
now you're talking to me like I'm still a professional athlete. No, I'm just a Mr. Mom that wants to race a triathlon at the end of summer.
Yeah, that's why I always say we know where you're at, we know where you want to go. We have to work with what's in the middle, and that's your responsibilities with your partner, your job, your finances, your children, school, if applicable. And that's how we adjust. If you tell me you've only got 31 minutes a day to train, then we build a program. If you can only work out 31 minutes a day on Monday and 17 on Tuesday and an hour on Wednesday, that's the way we build it. And that's what I want for you is as your little one wakes up, we're going to have to fluctuate. I like you, knowing you'll go to the playground, you'll bring your scraping tool and some hand lotion and be working on your ankle while she's going up and down the slide. It's just, that's just the way you work.
Then I'm going to
That's how we all
dive
do
as I see her like crashing for something, and I'm going to re-sprain my ankle trying to catch her.
Oh, of course not. You'll be at the bottom of the slide scraping and just catch her in your other arm.
Yeah. Total Superman. But no, it is kind of depressing. My nice 955 Garmin, it says that my training readiness is prime. My heart rate status is incredibly balanced. Unfortunately, if I look what you're talking about, the last couple days of sleep, I have been getting around 8 hours, which is more. Typically, I normally get like 6 to 7. And so it's gone up only about an hour and a half, but that's still not the 9 hours that you were talking about.
But think about it. You went up an hour and a half. What was your deep sleep out of those 8.5? Excuse me.
Gosh, man, I've never gotten this much deep sleep. Normally, my deep sleep is always in single digits, which is nuts. And now, looking at it, I'm averaging over an hour and 10 minutes the last 5 days of deep, which is wow.
What's your awake window? How much time are you awake?
4 minutes, at least last night.
Okay, so just so the listeners know what we're talking about, on the Garmin platform, when you sleep, we can extrapolate sleep data. Your goal is to try to get as close to 2 hours of deep sleep as possible. So Johnny, you were saying you're already less than an hour to begin with. Now you're over an hour, and we want the awake time to be less than 10 minutes. And you said you're what, down to 2, you said?
Yeah, 4 minutes. And yesterday I was 5. The day before that, I was 3, which that's all. Like, I feel, it's crazy because I feel ready to go work out hard, but then towards the end of the day, I'm more tired than I used to, and I didn't even work out hard.
But let's think about this. If you were training for your half Ironman and it was this weekend, when we look at the week of a race, we do what's called a taper. And people get concerned about a taper because what we do is the definition of trying to be tapered for a race is essentially shedding fatigue. Well, you've gone from training 12, 15, 16 hours a week to now you're doing less than 1 hour a week. Your body thinks it's in taper mode. Look at what you just said about all the metrics. They're all in the sweet spot. Your body thinks you've pulled back because you're getting ready to taper. It doesn't know you're injured. There's nothing, like you say, there's no indicator in your watch that checks the box that says injury, ooh, ooh, ooh. So what we want to recognize, Johnny, look at your HRV. Look how balanced your HRV probably is. Excuse me.
Yeah,
look how balanced your HRV is.
It's right in the sweet spot.
Sweet spot. And you see the gray box around it? You see the gray box where the green sits in the middle of?
Yeah. No,
So when you...
Sorry, go for it. I'm interrupting you.
I just want the listeners to understand, when you're looking at your dashboard on the Garmin, it's looking at today against its historical information collected about you. So it's looking at it going, okay, Johnny's resting heart rate is a little bit lower because he's sleeping more. Oh, wait, no, it's a little bit high because of an injury, but the watch doesn't know it's injured. What it's doing is it's comparing your highs and lows and looking at it as an average. So right now you're in the sweet spot of HRV. You're in the sweet spot. You said training is at an optimal level. Your readiness is high, all because you've shed fatigue over the last 7 days. Now, the crazy part about it is I want everybody to think about it's kind of like finances. You're not going to see the benefits of your immediate decision today. You're not going to see that for an extended period of time. The workout you do today, you're not going to see the benefits of that 8, 10, 12 weeks away. which is for a lot of people is very frustrating, and it unmotivates them because they're like, I've been working out for 2 weeks and I don't see a difference. You're not going to. You're probably not going to see it for another 8 weeks. Keep going. Now, when it comes to when you're looking at the training readiness, Johnny, think about the tail of the snake. The tail of the snake is following the head. So you've been consistent, you've been eating well, you've been sleeping well. Well, the metrics of the tail of the snake comes in and you're at the sweet spot because you've been doing it correctly for so long now. You've been pretty committed to this now for a couple, 2-3 months. You've thrown in some races. You've allowed yourself to recover from the races. If you look at the quality of food, that's why I was asking about the quality of sleep. How much deep sleep, and how much awake time. That's really the synopsis of whether you're sleeping good or not. I have people that'll sleep, they'll present themselves to us. They're in bed 10 hours a night, but they're only getting 8 minutes of deep sleep. You're not getting anything out of being in bed. That's another issue all in itself.
Yeah, that's crazy because that's usually how I've been.
Yeah. You got to look at the quality and the quantity of food and sleep. It's not just about going through the habit. It's about making sure that what you're doing is working.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I know that like the trick to waking up early is going to bed on time. And with this stuff, I've definitely been I've definitely been going to bed early. That's it.
Well, remember, if you don't give it what
some of that stuff that I can see.
Remember what we talked about. If you don't give it what it needs, it will eventually take it.
Exactly.
And we just prefer it not to be that way. And you could get into what we call the economy, what it takes on the body to take it from you versus the economy, the cost of when you choose to give it to it. And I know that can get a little bit nebulous if you're not in a physiological world. The body will eventually take what it needs, but the cost of getting what it needs is tremendously higher than if you understand the purpose and the benefit, and then you proactively do it. I guess an analogy I could give to the moto world is, if you wait to oil your chain, how much have you lost in the power category versus proactively making sure that chain is lubed and at the proper tension? Otherwise, what that's going to do to robbing the power, the way the suspension handles, et cetera, et cetera. You got to look at what you want the output to be and the elements that have to be adjusted to get that desirable outcome. That's why I always want you to be proactive. And that's why my whole program is based on you have to have knowledge of why you're doing it. Please don't just do it because somebody told you to. I need you to be investing in why, the purpose behind it. If you have an understanding, then you have to embrace the responsibility of just simply do it. There's no other way around it.
Okay, I just was looking at trying to find the stuff because normally I don't do Garmin Connect on. I normally just do it on the watch. So just trying to show some of that.
So if you go, if you're on are you on connect.garmin.com?
Yeah, right now, and I'm under training status.
No, go to the blue icons. Go down to reports.
Okay.
When you go down to reports, in the dead center of your screen, go down to health and fitness. It's like 6 from the bottom in the dead center. Click on health and fitness.
Okay.
And then you can click on body battery. You can click on resting heart rate. You can look at stress. And in the top right-hand corner, you can toggle it from either 7 days or 4 weeks. And that'll give the viewers a better understanding of, you can see, in fact, what'll be interesting, Johnny, is go to a 4-week display so you can see the day that you got hurt. I'd be very curious to see what your stress number looks like the 48 hours after.
Dun, dun, dun.
So if you're on the left-hand side, blue icon, the last one is reports, then click on health and fitness.
Yeah, so the last 7 days, my stress has definitely been higher.
Now in the top right-hand corner, click on 4 weeks instead of 7 days, top right-hand corner of that report. And how much has the last 7 days differed from the 3 weeks before it?
Dun, dun, dun. I don't see a crazy spike because this was just on Sunday that I...
Okay. Put your mouse on each one of those gray dots. How much did it jump up Monday and Tuesday after the accident? Did you pick up a couple points?
Dun, dun, dun. As soon as it happened, yeah, I went up from, I was at 20, then I was at 30, average, then 27, then 20, and now I'm
Yeah.
finally at 8, back to normal.
But look at someone like yourself as someone who is fit. A 10-point increase shows you the impact of that injury. And the fact that it's actually already starting to come down shows that you've taken the time to focus on recovery. Otherwise, you would just see the stress continue to tick up.
Yeah,
And
no,
that's what
because
makes
I
this
look at
valuable.
everything else, and I'm ready to go. At least what my watch says.
Yeah. So right in the middle of the screen where you're clicked on stress score, go to the very top and click on calories. I want to see something real quick.
I don't calories in and out.
I'm sorry. On the left-hand side where the blue icons are at, go down to reports, the very last blue icon,
Okay.
and then click on health and fitness again. And then click on calories when you open that drop-down box. And then the top right-hand corner, make sure it's adjusted to 7 days, not 4 weeks.
Gotcha.
And then look at what was your calorie burn rate. Look at the blue. The red represents the active calories. The blue, has the blue bumped up at all since the injury on Sunday? So if you put your mouse in the blue, it'll tell you what your resting calorie needs are. Has that fluctuated much?
No, it hasn't. It's staying at 1,978.
I'm sorry, I talked over you. What's the blue 1,900 calories?
Basically 1,978.
Okay. And you notice how you could drop a plumb line across all those blue lines, how consistent that is?
Yeah.
All right. So what the blue represents is what we refer to as your basal metabolic needs. How many calories do you need to sustain life? So even though you're not working out, you need to consume approximately 1,900 calories. And people go, well, I'm not working out. I'm not going to eat 1,900. That is absurd. If you don't eat 1,900 calories, what you're going to do is you're just going to add more stress to the system on a system that's already stressed, that's trying to heal. Think about this. If you're out on the motorcycle and I say, Johnny, I've got this really brilliant idea. I'm going to run your radiator at half fluid, and I'm going to run your engine casings at half because I want to save some weight. And you go, Rob, do you not understand the fundamentals of mechanics? The motor's going to overwork. It's going to be overstressed because of heat. Well, why in the hell, when you're injured, would you want to eat less calories than your body needs to sustain life when it's in a state of trauma? Doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And even if you're not injured, once your watch gets kind of a baseline of what you're burning on a daily basis, every time that's why I have such a problem with people who suggest a calorically restricted diet. Why would you do that? You're just going to add more stress to the system, produce more cortisol. Cortisol is a fat magnet. If you want to drop body fat, commit to exercise and then commit to the exercise at the right intensity, which leverages body fat, not burn stored sugar. The higher the intensity, more stored sugar. Lower the intensity, more stored fat. And I will have an adult conversation with anybody who wants to have this discussion. I didn't create the principles of physiology, but you have to respect it. When a body's under trauma, you've got to make sure that you're eating a sufficient amount of calories to just continue to heal. If you keep, Johnny, if you hired me to build you a 2-story building and I only showed up with enough bricks and enough wood to build a 1-story, and you're like, well, Rob, did you not recognize that I need enough materials to build 2? Well, you're asking the body to rebuild itself every day, and you think having a deficit of 5, 6, 1,000 calories, that just doesn't mathematically add up. What do you think rebuilds the body? Food. Then why in the hell are you starving it? Well, I got to drop body fat. You're not dropping body fat. You're starving the body. And you're like, yeah, but the scale went down 10 pounds. That's because you lost water. We could talk about it over and over again, but we're staying on the context of you healing. You've got to eat at least 2,000 calories, Johnny, a day, or you won't heal.
I just need to make sure it's not in cookie calories.
Cookies, exactly. Fruits, vegetables, and lean protein, which ironically is difficult because those 3 items are low in calories. And I always use the analogy of an extra large egg. An extra large egg is approximately 75 calories. So if you take 2,000 calories divided by 75, that's how many eggs, if you just want to look at it from a quantification of food, you've got to eat that from sunrise to sunset just to break even. That's why we see people are gaining weight because they're starving themselves, and they're gaining weight because the body thinks it's going into starvation mode. It's converting the food they eat to stored body fat, because when it converts a gram of body fat to energy, it gets 9 calories of energy versus carbohydrate, which only yields 4. It's not as sophisticated as it sounds. Starving the body makes you fat. It's just the way it is. You'll lose weight initially. It's water weight. And then you end up putting on that you lost plus another 3 or 4 pounds. That's why it's called a yo-yo diet. And that's why it's a multi-billion-dollar business. Pretty simple to fix or figure out, excuse me.
Right before I let you go here, intermittent fasting. A lot of people decide to not eat for 12 to 24 hours. Isn't that essentially the same thing that what you were just talking about as far as you're starving yourself?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've heard me say this, you and I have talked about it off the record. It's a concept that's once again been taken out of context. If you look at HIIT training by definition, there's a lot of credibility to it. But when somebody's already tired, dehydrated, and overstressed, how in the hell does a HIIT training make any sense? You're just adding more fatigue to a fatigued body. Doesn't make sense to me. When you're talking about intermittent fasting, the idea of the hormonal changes that goes on, there's definitely credibility to it. But again, when a body is already under a lot of stress, you've got financial issues, we hate our boss, we don't like our partner, we've got all these other stresses in our life, and now you're going to go ahead and starve the body for 12 hours. To me, I can't buy into the concept. Now, for my clients that are listening to this, they're going to say, well, Rob, you have us do intermittent fasting rides. Yes, I do. But here's the reason. I only would encourage an athlete to do an intermittent or to do a workout after a 12-hour fast if I know that they're 100% rested and hydrated, meaning and we can talk about what proper hydration means, but I don't want to be long-winded, Johnny. Intermittent fasting works. It's designed the way your bodies have been designed. It's more of a survival mechanism in our body. I did a podcast called There's a Difference Between Surviving versus Thriving. The body.
Well, you're not cutting calories. You're just you're just not eating them all until later is, I guess.
But how does that make sense? So I want you to take your daughter when she wakes up, and I want you to say, you know what, Alexa, we're not going to feed you for 12 hours. I'm going to intermittently fast you today. What is she going to act like for the next 12 hours?
Oh, she's going to be a terror. She's going to be hangry.
Yeah. And so what's the difference between a child and an adult besides the fact that people wrote books that says if you intermittent fast, the body goes through all these changes? Yes, you're right. In a textbook environment, the body goes through those changes. But the problem is if you're going to give me somebody that's sufficiently rested, sufficiently hydrated, sufficiently fed, and now you want to go a 12-hour window, Johnny, would you rather dyno a bike that has an hour on it or dyno a bike that has 100 hours on it?
Well, I mean,
as dumb as that, exactly, right? You're like, no shit, Sherlock, it doesn't make sense. Well, why would you want to put the body under more stress when every other element of its life is already under stress and call that being healthy? I don't give a rat's ass what the textbook says happens when someone intermittently fasts. I always look at the stress that the body is under before you submit it to a workout, intermittent fasting, a HIIT training. I don't care what you want to discuss. Please back it up. What are you bringing to that workout? What are you bringing to that intermittent fasting session? If you're sitting and you've got business work and you've got children to raise and you've got checkbooks to balance and you want to be healthy, starving yourself for 12 hours isn't any more effective than it would be for you waking your child up and not letting them eat for 12 hours. It just doesn't rationally make sense.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think we'll have to do more of these, Coach, because I think this is really good information. And I hope everybody made it this far because this is info you need to know. And if you've made it this far, make sure you go follow Coach Rob with Complete Racing Solutions. He puts out a video every single day on his Instagram and on YouTube. And, leave a comment down below to just start a conversation. So, Rob, I do have to thank you for coming on board. And again, I wish I had you 10 years ago.
I appreciate it, man. Let's just get you healed up and let's get you that starting line of that half Ironman, the half marathon, your marathon, and your Ironman.
I just want to finish. So if it comes down
That's
to
right.
it that I have to just one leg hop it to finish it, we'll do something. But you want to brop with me?
Oh, absolutely.
Brop, 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 brop.